Hello, everybody, and thank you for making the time to chat today. We are going to have a very special guest chatting with us, Mr. Tom Barron with the U.S. Department of Commerce Economic Development Administration, better known as the Federal EDA, chatting about some programs for local units of government, local community colleges and technical colleges, tribal organizations, et cetera, on grants available to assist that come from federal disaster declarations. So maybe before we get started, just so Tom knows who's all on the call, maybe we'll just go around and do a brief round of introductions. If you don't mind turning on your camera, and I'll, rather than play a game of standoff, I'll just call you out. Again, I'm Jordan Zeller with the East Central Regional Development Commission, and I'll just call them out as I see them on my screen. Next to me is Heather.
Hi there, I'm Heather Rank with Pine Technical and Community College.
Awesome, thank you. And next to her is Michelle.
Morning, Michelle Thomas with the East Central Regional Development Commission.
And the next row, we've got Shannon.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Shannon, Dean of Academic and Community Outreach at Anoka Ramsey Community College.
Awesome. And next to her is Mike.
With the City of Pine City.
Thank you. And Chris.
Hi, I'm Chris McNally. I'm the Kanabec County Coordinator.
And Nancy.
Good morning, Nancy, with the Chisago County HRA EDA.
And Michelle.
Michelle McPherson, City of Princeton.
And Bob.
Bob Gerald, City of Princeton Public Works Director and Deputy Emergency Management Coordinator.
And another Bob.
Hey, everybody. Bob Voss, Executive East Central Regional Development Commission.
Thank you. And Will. Okay. And John.
John Peckman, Chisago City Administrator.
Thank you. And James.
EDA.
Did that? I think you got cut off there. Jim Hartshorn, right?
Yes, Kanabec County EDA.
Excellent. Thank you. And Kristen.
Kirsten Fury, City of Mora Community Development Director.
And did I miss anybody? All right. Well, thanks again for making the time to chat. Going to turn it over to Tom Barron, again, with the U.S. Department of Commerce Federal EDA. Tom, take it away.
Thank you, Jordan. Hey, good morning, everybody. Thank you for taking some time out of your day to for the presentation here. I wanted to do some just awareness building, one of EDA and then two of some somewhat recent FEMA disaster declarations that does impact counties within East Central's region. So I'm going to turn on my share screen because I have a PowerPoint I'll be using. Please, by any means, if you do have questions throughout the presentation, we will have some time in, but also feel free to chime in. If Jordan, if you could keep an eye out on the chat box for me, I'm not seeing that. I see that here, but certainly want to answer any questions they have. So I'm just going to hop right into it about the review. The right screen here. So today, said I'd like to just talk a little bit about EDA itself, then just get right into the disaster declaration, a brief discussion about eligible applicants, and really get into the projects that we would, I guess, maybe expect to see as a result of the disaster declaration. Talk about some of the financials and timings associated with the grants, and then make sure we do have some time for Q&A, and then next steps. So starting out with EDA, I know a lot of local EDAs as well, but from a federal perspective, we are the Economic Development Administration. We're a bureau for the U.S. Department of Commerce, and we are charged with here, leading the federal economic development agenda primarily by making grants that support economic development projects. And we do this in all 50 states, the territories within the United States. As you can see on the screen now, EDA, while its headquarters are in DC, it does have, I would say, certainly a regional presence, and we're divided up into 6 regional offices. Minnesota falls within the Chicago regional office. The office is literally in downtown Chicago. And here you'll see all the states in green, or you'll see bullet pointed on the right, fall within the Chicago regional office. I bring this up for a couple of points. One, just to kind of give kind of a sense of how EDA is structured, but I think it's also important to kind of understand that for a lot of EDA's grants, they're considered regional in nature, and they do work through a regional office. EDA operates typically off an annual appropriation from Congress. With COVID, we are just getting through a couple of one-time appropriations, but in general, you'll see at the top of the screen, this is typically what a budget looks like for us, where we do have our about $364 million for our regular EDA programs. If those of you who might be familiar with EDA, this is our public works and economic adjustment assistance, as well as our local technical assistance and short-term planning. This year, we did receive the second sub-bullet point, the $726 million for the Stevenson-Wilder Technology Act. This is something we're going to be releasing this spring. There's 2 major programs that are associated with this. One are called the Tech Hubs, which were originally identified in the CHIPS Act as a couple of years. And then we also have the Recompete program that will be off as well. You may have seen some emails regarding this, as the programming for both of these programs was recently entered into the, and we had a public comment period for those. And then last sub-bullet point there, I think is certainly relevant for today's conversation, $500 million for natural disasters that took place in 2021 and 2022. I will say that, if we go back to the map of the regions here, that $500 million is to provide disaster assistance to the country. We saw quite a few of the disasters come from the United States, typically related with hurricanes. In the Chicago regional office, so that 6-state region in green, I would say easily has the lion's share of disaster declared. The last note I'd make on this, the ARPA funds, which was a one-time appropriation from Congress to help recover and build resiliency from COVID-19. Those funds have been obligated. They were wrapped up of 2022. Moving into the disaster declaration overview. So a history of being involved in disaster recovery. I think a key thing here is what's in bold on the screen, is that it's here to support long-term community economic recovery planning and project implementation. I think other federal agencies, say like FEMA, are really geared towards short-term recovery and that immediate response, where from a federal perspective, I think there's a recognition or a need for, hey, now that we have things kind of cleaned up, if you will, there needs to be some discussion about how we prevent or how we're better able to respond to future disasters, and that's where EDA and its grant program comes in. Some of the financials of EDA's disaster recovery and resiliency funding. You'll see here in the 90s is about 1.3 billion, and we call it supplemental appropriation, so it's not a part of our regular programming. In recent years, and some of the examples I'm going to showcase in a couple slides from now, we received $1.2 billion in supplemental funding And now as a reminder, in 2023, we received $500 million for the disaster supplemental funding. The last bullet point here, I'll quickly go through. I have screenshots of each of these maps, but these are the 3 disaster designations that are active in EDA terms for the state of Minnesota. So you'll see here the first map, a couple things to point out on these maps if you're not familiar with them. If you visit FEMA's website, you can these maps as well. They're publicly available. They give it a disaster number. In this case, it's 4658. The DR is a nomenclature for the type of disaster. And then over on the right, you'll see here the hatched counties are eligible for public assistance, where the counties in there do not have a designation. So this is the first of 3. The second of 3. Third of 3, which I believe this would be, where each region comes into play here. I include the other 2 designations just to simply point out that, quite a bit of the state is covered in disaster declarations, down from a variety of storms that mostly took place in 22, from my understanding. So now, how does this translate into look like for projects? To start out, as I said previously, EDA implements its work through making grants to regional projects. In that, eligible applicants are either units of government, so anything from town, county, region, and state, nonprofits, institutions of higher education, federally recognized tribes, and pretty much folks that are, I would say, in the business of expanding the public good. I would say that the 2 major groups that are not eligible to EDA for funding and therefore cannot apply to EDA for grants are private for-profit companies, as well as individuals. So say I apply to EDA, the application will go nowhere because I'm not an eligible applicant. So I say that in terms of kind of setting the stage here for what projects could look like and what grants the EDA could look like. EDA's focus is on, again, that long-term economic recovery development. And it understands that, there's shocks to the systems. There's recognition that, hey, we both have a recovery to implement, but also most often folks learn that there's some additional resiliency that is needed for their communities. And I would say resilience in EDA terms is a pretty flexible term. We don't always have to think of things on, okay, we had some flooding in our city of, a fictitious city of Smith. EDA is only going to think of a resilience project as something that does something to mitigate future flooding. I think, in an example like that, EDA would think of many other ways that resiliency could be established. And I think you'll see that with some of the projects that EDA has funded that I'll be showcasing here. So again, if folks are interested in submitting a grant application to EDA, these are some things that EDA is going to think about funding in kind of what's in its thought for building resiliency. So the top one, the job creation and economic diversification. Again, those that have EDA know that's tried and true throughout the history of EDA. That's always of primary importance. I would say, as well as that access to private investment. If we think about, EDA as a fairly robust revolving loan fund portfolio as well. Though also is going to be interested in projects that support the creation of new businesses and jobs, projects that encourage entrepreneurship. What was the next point there of of strengthening and either existing or emerging industry clusters. I know that, within our regions, there are certain industries that stand out, and there's needs to support those, as well as emerging industries that, you have a local entrepreneur business, hitting it out of the park and looking at ways to support the growth of that particular industry. And then the last bullet point there, I think, is another kind of tried and true, which is infrastructure construction. I would say we think of infrastructure in terms of sewer, water, actual wastewater treatment facilities, roads, things of that nature. Broadband would be included in that. I would say power is also included if it is owned and operated, or which should say owned by an eligible applicant. So if you say you have a municipal or a nonprofit owned power utility, they would be eligible to EDA. Again, a little bit more on how EDA is going to define resilience. I think the highlighted areas at the top that enhance a community or region's ability to anticipate, withstand, or recover from future disruptions is a key thing to think about. And something that I work with applicants basically on a daily basis to help craft narratives that make that connection between their proposed project and, say, in this case, resilience principles. I would just point out the last section of the slide as well, as eCentral maintains a comprehensive economic strategy, or SEDS, for your region. A couple of years ago now, EDA, and this was before COVID, actually had required that resilience be incorporated as an additional, I believe it's a chapter for your SEDS. So I would say that's a good resource to take a look for more information about EDA resilience. Now I'm going to start to move into some example projects that EDA has funded. So I think some maybe takeaways here are, one, that EDA is actively seeking projects to fund, and these are a sampling of the flavor of projects that EDA is interested in and that have good alignment with what's important to EDA. So I'm going to hop right into it here. These projects are primarily taken from the state of Wisconsin. As within the Chicago regional office, they had a somewhat recent disaster declaration. It was in 2019, although the first project I have up here is from 2010. Again, some things to think about with each of these projects is EDA has a competitive grant process. Not every application that it receives is funded. Basically, the projects that are most competitive move forward, and that is just based on the real world scenario that there's just a finite amount of funds, and that EDA has to make investments where it sees that it can have the most kind of bang for its buck, if you will. So EDA does have what's called an investment review committee, that when an applicant, this investment review committee reviews the applicants to a presentation about the project and then makes a determination on if it'll be moving forward or not. So if this first project, obviously successful, as it received a $2 million grant from EDA. This is a food enterprise center. Again, if we think about this, the disaster, I'm not sure the exact disaster in this, but most of the time they're natural disaster, usually floods, strong winds, tornadoes, things of that nature. Food enterprise, when you just immediately think like, boy, that's weird. That's not really a direct connection to a recovery, say, from flooding. But if you think from a resilience standpoint, this is going to lead to a more resilient region for this project area. Because if you look at the actual impacts at the bottom here, 18 new startups were created. They're at full capacity in the the enterprise center. And then we also see about $1.7 million in private sector investment. So this certainly will lead to a more resilient region around the Viroqua area. And again, that's where that satisfies, what that EDA is interested in, projects that support long-term recovery and resilience building. Next one, we're going to move over to the city of Arcadia, Wisconsin. This one is based, I think I incorrectly earlier said that there was some 2019 disaster declarations in Wisconsin. It was actually 2018. This project was awarded for a little over $4.3 million to the city of Arcadia. Now, this one, I would say, like when I was preparing this presentation, I'm like, this is that, very obvious connection that the project is to upgrade form stormwater pump stations and storm system upgrades to mitigate future flooding. So in this case, there's a very direct connection, or nexus is a term we use within EDA. I would say that that's, all projects don't need to exhibit this direct of a connection. As you saw with the Viroqua project, the agribusiness and food enterprise center, is not a connection, but does build resiliency. This one does look to build recovery and resiliency by mitigating future flooding, therefore providing a very predictable place for business to happen. Again, the impacts of this, we have over 100 jobs created, and it probably most importantly, it prevents future flooding. In downtown, if anybody's familiar with Arcadia, Wisconsin, it is home to a very large Ashley furniture facility, as well as a lot of business in the area that will now have some enhanced protection from future flooding. Moving over to the city of La Crosse, southwestern part of Wisconsin, right on the Mississippi River. And it's a very flat area right next to the river before you get up into the bluffs. Again, this is some 2018 disaster declaration. EDA awarded this project a little over $3.6 million. And again, I would say this is more of that, maybe that recovery type of project where there's I would say more of the direct versus the indirect location, where it's upgrading some lift stations and boosting and a booster station, as well as some other stormwater upgrades. Again, here you're going to see what you're probably seeing as a trend here, that with successful projects to EDA, that there's job creation, job retention, and some sort of recovery or resiliency built into it. In this case, it's also mitigating flooding in industrial areas of the city. I wanted to throw this one in because this is an example of a non-construction project to EDA. This is up in the northwestern part of the state. Northwest Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission is located in Spooner, Wisconsin, and they serve, I believe it's a 10-county region up there. They received just under $500,000 to really do a study that looks to identify, evaluate, and address critical infrastructure for the protection of future natural disasters. And in particular, this is looking at preserving, economic impacts and be able to basically better recover and have additional resiliency for future natural disasters. Getting towards the end here of my example projects, but one of the last ones here, City of Aurora. Those of you who know EDA know that EDA does quite a few business parks. And again, this is another example where maybe not a direct connection between, in this case, a project, but that there is resilience building here. In this case, they received $2.6 million to create a 70-acre industrial and business park. Again, we see some jobs created. I would note too that, with these different projects, you're seeing different numbers in job creations. And I think that's a good recognition. EDA realizes that, 20 jobs may be critically important to say, smaller community or a more rural area, where 20 jobs in, say, downtown Minneapolis might not have the same, impacts. It's something that certainly is of mind to EDA when it's, that it needs to think about where the project is located in kind of accordingly. Case, the connection here is that they wanted to create a space where they have development ready sites in a non-flood prone area, which at least seems reasonable. Okay, I would just wrap up before I get too much into financials and timing. I think what you saw here was quite a few examples of like say business entrepreneurship with the business training center. I would add that EDA has a strong interest in workforce. So those of you with representing tech colleges and community colleges, there certainly is a desire from EDA to fund projects that enhance workforce training, workforce skill development. I would certainly encourage you to reach out for projects like that. Couple of just real quick examples of what that could look like. It could be purchasing of equipment for training needs. Let's say you want to train folks on welding. It could be the purchasing of welding training stations. It could also be the construction of a facility. Again, if we use, say, a welding training center, let's say you need to renovate existing space or you need to build a new facility to house that fictitious welding training center. That is certainly something where EDA could be a partner with. And if you're in one of these FEMA disaster impacted counties, you have eligibility from that standpoint. Now, if you happen to be in the audience here and you didn't see your county represented on where you do your business, we can certainly look at other ways of establishing eligibility. It is not limited to disaster declarations. This is just kind of a point in time where this is very appropriate to talk about disasters. I would say another significant area of EDA projects is earlier, critical infrastructure. So thinking, road, water, and wastewater treatment plants. Let's say you're in a rural area that has a lot of agricultural freight movements. I think we all know, those heavy loads that accompany that are typically not good for local roads that they just take a beating over the years. Those are other projects that we can look at because it is building resiliency. Broadband is another area. If folks are in an area that's served by a nonprofit broadband provider, or say something as a co-op owned broadband provider, we can certainly look at a project for that. And overall, I think just the big is EDA is interested in projects that both build resiliency and lead to job creation, in particular, high skill, high wage job creation. Some other things that EDA can fund, I think, isn't necessarily a slam dunk, but I can work with applicants on these types of projects to see if we can develop a project. Is tourism. Is one of them. I know that a lot of areas in the state, tourism is a big part of the economy. Tourism assets may have been the ones that took it on the chin for damage. If an applicant can demonstrate that tourism is a significant part of their local or regional economy, that can create a competitive application to EDA for supporting tourism projects. Things that EDA is going to be real tough for EDA to fund and just probably not very competitive are, say, downtown development or redevelopment projects. Some of the reason for that is typically what EDA sees is that there's not the high skill, high wage job creations, that these are typically supporting hospitality or retail types of jobs, which is just a bit outside of the lane of the need to create high skill, high wage jobs with EDA funds. And then community development projects. EDA and certainly is in no way making judgments on needs for, say, community development assets like parks, trails, things of that nature. It's just EDA is very much focused on economic development and needs to see a significant economic development component to any project it funds. So now moving into the financials and timing. I would say projects can go as high with this one-time appropriation, and this is very, very unique and very much outside of EDA's regular programming, but we're going to certainly be open to listening to projects that have a quite high amount. There's always, you know, I can always guarantee that projects are going to be funded. That is a determination that our investment review committee makes. But I would say I would be interested in hearing projects that could go, say, up to $10 million in the EDA request. From the grant rate side of it, EDA can go up to 80% on a disaster project if there is justification for that. Typically, the justification is that the applicant demonstrates that, hey, there's a serious per capita issue, or there's something else happening, maybe some job losses in the area, or something else that when you combine it with this disaster declaration, we create some negative economic conditions, which justifies kind of the standard 50% grant rate. I think, you know, in terms of timing, it is in a couple of different areas. One, from the time submits an application to EDA and you hit that submit button on grants.gov, about 2 to 3 months after that, you're going to get an initial indication on like, hey, this project unfortunately just isn't competitive enough to move. We're going to close out this application, or you're going to get what's called a merits further consideration letter, which means EDA is not committing to the project and making a grant award right at that second, but it certainly is interested in it, and it just needs to do some more due diligence. From there, if we go back to that date, an applicant submits a grant online to the time of potential award is typically about 6 months. So there is a bit of lead time on it. So I would say, you know, I see this mostly in business park projects where, you know, a community may have been approached by a company like, hey, we could build next week. So they contact EDA and it's like, hey, how quick can we get some infrastructure going for a business park? You know, if you're ready to go next week, that's going to be tough for EDA to be a part of. But if you do have some runway or some lead time, EDA is a great partner and can certainly provide a very significant investment to, in that case, a business park. But you know, that timing applies to all types of projects. We'll also say timing comes into play in, you know, Congress has a desire when they appropriated this money that it's out and projects get funded in a relative short time frame, because it wants to make sure that areas of the country are recovering and building resiliency from the disasters. So I would certainly encourage you, if you are thinking about a project, even if it's just an idea or brainstorming, please do reach out to me, because we are going to take the approach that the first applications that come in are going to get reviewed first. And at a certain point, the disaster funding is going to be exhausted. We do have some backup ability to use our regional office funds under our Public Works and Economic Adjustment Assistance programs to fund some additional projects if there's just we're seeing a strong need for it. But I would say that those that made their applications early on would probably have the best chance to ensure funding is available, and then you know, to get their project funded. With that, that my presentation, I'm going to move right to information while we open it up to Q&A. Any questions I can answer?
This is Jordan at the ECRDC. knowing that disaster declarations may not cover every specific location in the county, what are you seeing for your regular grant program? How is funding looking for that one for your infrastructure program, Tom?
Yep, plenty of funds available. Our regular funding again, our economic adjustment assistance, we receive an annual appropriation for it. We've been a little light in Minnesota. So I would certainly say there is funds available, and there's a desire to EDA that, it wants to be doing economic development work in the state. And certainly whether it's within a disaster declared county or a non-disaster declared county, my role with EDA is to, work with applicants to determine like, okay, is there a good fit here? And furthermore, to help develop the most competitive application we can to, seek funding under, again, disaster declaration or any of other EDA's funding opportunities.
We had another question in the chat box. Do you have to have a business lined up for the infrastructure for a business park? A bird in the hand, if you will?
I would certainly say it makes it more competitive to EDA. All projects, EDA is that it's typically going to steer away from projects that are, I would say, more speculative. And this just seems to be mostly the case with business parks that, I kind of jokingly say EDA has nightmares at night that it's developed a business park where it's got a couple of $1 million of infrastructure in the ground, but there's no building going on. So EDA is going to want to see some reasonable assurances that there's demand for creating new development ready sites. So one way certainly to do that is to have a business lined up. EDA has what's called an ED 900B, B as in beneficiary form, where, in a lot of organizations or agencies that make grants have something similar to this. It's basically asking a company to say, hey, can you put this to paper? Keep in mind, there's no clawback procedures. It's a good faith estimate over a 9-year period that if EDA were to make this investment, what would that allow you as far as job creation, job retention, and private investment? So, a company that would be approached to fill this one out would be like, yeah, we're interested in moving into this proposed business park. We're an existing business that would allow us to add 10 new jobs business because we're at our current location, we just can't expand anymore. And then along with that, we would have a private investment of say $1 million adding on or actually building new in the business park. So like I said, that's kind of the gold standard, if you will. And I would say almost every business park that is funded by EDA, in some cases, they don't have the beneficiary forms. I would say the vast majority of them do. There are other ways to show, in addition to beneficiary forms, there's software tools, like say MZ and Implan that can create scenarios about what they, would expect to create for jobs, as well as you could compare it to similar types of projects. But like I said, the having that business lined up for it, I would say easily is the most competitive way.
Awesome, thank you. Other questions for Mr. Barron? Other questions for Tom? All right, so I guess one other question I have is what is the next step? How do we get the ball rolling? Assuming getting the meeting set up and chatting with you a little bit, Tom, to see what EDA's appetite would be?
Yeah, yep. A couple of things or a couple of thoughts with that. One, there's no question that that's out of bounds. Please do set up a meeting, even if like you're uncertain on like, I have no idea if this is a legitimate project or not, or that could be competitive to EDA. That's my role with EDA, is to be that point of contact to have an initial conversation about like, hey, we just, we're in this presentation today, or we heard about EDA from, wherever else. We got some things going on. We got, one thought for a project, or even a couple. Hey, what do you think this would be competitive to EDA? So there's absolutely no silly or wrong questions to have to ask. I would rather have the opportunity to go out and kind of investigate if we can look at a project. I'll be pretty frank with you. If I'm not seeing it, I'm going to tell you that, because I don't want to waste your time and set unrealistic expectations. To some point, I don't want to waste my time either. But I just, like I said, I want to be as plain as I can with folks and give them what they're looking at. But with that, it's not a bother at all to reach out to me or to work with Jordan to contact me to set up a meeting. What typically happens is we just set up a call, usually a virtual or a phone call, to talk through. You just kind of thinking, maybe there's some things about the project. Maybe if you don't, it's just purely an idea at this point. We can talk to it and figure out a direction for it.
Tom had another question pop up. If our county is declared a disaster area, do all the municipalities within that county qualify?
Yes, yeah, because the rationale behind that, and let's just say, as an example, let's say your particular county dam, which was on the western side of the county, your municipalities on the east side of it. The thought is that when a county disaster declaration is made, that it's the damage is usually at parts of the county, but not the whole county. But inevitably the whole county's impacted in some way, or there's an opportunity to build more resilience. And I would say that a disaster declaration creates that eligibility to access EDA programs for any sort of applicant anywhere in the declared disaster county.
Right, thank you, sir. Other questions?
Michelle was just emailing me if we'd ever applied to EDA for broadband at all, and we haven't, because all of our providers are for profit. But now East Central Energy is starting to do broadband, so they would be a good candidate. They're a cooperative. I guess it's more of a statement than a question, but
Yeah.
maybe you could talk about that a little bit.
Is that true if you're for profit?
Pardon me?
I was just wondering, because if you're for, do you have to be a nonprofit if you're an energy agency to apply? I was just thinking the same thing. Broadband is such a need up here. I'm looking for any angle to get more funding for broadband. So.
Yeah, and EDA is now in the broadband space. I would say starting with COVID, that's really where it expanded. Just a couple of brief thoughts about the types of projects that EDA has funded in broadband. One, from a non-construction perspective, was what's called a gap analysis. It was for an 18-county region to say, okay, we have some unique geography, and in this case, geology as well. We need kind of a roadmap for what makes the most sense for deploying broadband. So in some cases of that region, it was the typical fiber in the right of way. Other cases, it was other ways to deliver it, whether that's wirelessly or other ways, because like I said, there was some hawk in the area and some other things that just made for different approaches. On a construction side, in Indiana, we funded a project where it is I won't use the term blimp. I believe the term for this is like a dirigible or something, but it's a very tall tower. If you think about, your big towers that are, 1,000 feet tall, and on top of it, it's got a blimp tethered to it, beams out broadband. We've also funded projects where it's literally putting fiber in the right of way. So some things to think about with that. EDA typically stays away from residential type of projects that are like, say, 95% residential. So if you have a project where it would primarily be served, the service areas would be industrial, commercial, maybe agriculture, and then there is a minor amount of residential, certainly something we can take a look at. As well as, you know, if they are that someone mentioned they're a power company as well. EDA, again, you know, as long as they're an eligible applicant, can look at needs there too on whether that's, say, maybe burying power lines, if there's a need for, say, substation work or things like that to build resiliency. Another type of project that EDA has funded is backup generators. Say if you have a business park that you want to make sure there's an uninterrupted power supply. You know, this wouldn't necessarily be related to a power company because this would be on site and could be, say, owned by a city and operated by it.
Thanks, Tom. Other thoughts, questions, comments, concerns? So I guess recapping, the first thing, if you've got a project you'd like to discuss, feel free to give me a call. We'll get a meeting set up with Tom. You know, whether it's you, any leadership at the city, your engineer, that kind of stuff. Have a little chat, just see what the EDA's appetite is, I guess would be the first step. You know, if you could come in with a ballpark guess of what a dollar figure would cost, that I suppose that helps a bit too, for Tom's end. And see what he says and kind of lay out the steps, next steps from there.
And I just kind of glanced up in my screen here, and it's not an incorrect statement that I cover Wisconsin. I just realized I could have updated that to include Minnesota as well. I cover the state of Wisconsin. I'm helping out and covering Minnesota while your normal point of contact has been on an extended leave. So that really isn't a toll, but something I will get updated.
Last call for questions. Going once, going twice. All right. Well, thank you everybody for making the time, and thanks Tom for chatting with us. Again, this meeting was recorded. I will be sending this out here shortly, probably today, tomorrow, something like that. Please feel free to forward this along to those that may be interested in hearing what Tom has to say. And again, to get the ball rolling, give myself, give Michelle, give Bob Voss a call, and we can get a meeting set up with Mr. Barron and see what we can do to assist you. So thank you, everybody. Have a good day.
Thanks,
a pleasant
Tom.
tomorrow.
Thanks, Jordan.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Tom.
Yeah.
Bye now.